Welcome to the Moral Crossroads podcast. We explore engaging topics daily, such as managing negative family dynamics, investing in real estate, starting a new career, learning a new trade, and much more. We invite you to tune in daily on this platform. This podcast shares information on investing, financial tools, moral guidance, clinical insights, and ethical considerations. It is intended for informational purposes only. The content provided does not constitute legal, economic, psychological, or moral advice and should not be interpreted as such. I'm Julie Hayes with my partner, Nathan Gray. Let's deep dive.
Ever feel like you just need to recharge your batteries after spending time with certain family members?
Oh, totally.
It's like their negativity is just contagious or something.
Yeah.
And you're not alone.
Not at all.
It's a super common thing, and it's something that we get asked about a lot.
Yeah.
So today we're diving into a listener's sources on toxic family dynamics and staying positive.
Okay.
To hopefully equip everybody with some tools to deal with those kind of tricky relationships, because they really can be tough.
They absolutely can. And you really hit on something with that whole recharging idea.
Yeah.
That feeling of needing to literally replenish your energy after certain interactions is honestly, it's a big red flag.
It is.
Yeah. It highlights how that negativity, especially within families, it's not just a temporary thing, they're in a bad mood.
Right.
It can really, truly impact your energy, your mood, even your, long-term mental well-being. It's a much bigger deal than people realize.
And that's interesting you say that, because one of the articles that we're looking at today is from Headspace.
Okay, love Headspace.
And it really resonated with me. The author talks about her own brother.
Uh-huh.
And she does not sugarcoat it, let me tell you.
Oh, wow.
But one of the things that really stood out was this anecdote about how when they were kids, she would always save a crumbled cookie for him.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, it kind of it speaks to that deep down desire we all have for that family connection.
Yeah.
It makes it even tougher when those relationships become, strained or difficult.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that yearning for a close family. It's powerful.
It is.
And a lot of people, they hear that and they're like, oh my gosh, that's me. I feel that so deeply.
Right.
And that's what makes, dealing with toxic family situations so hard, right?
It's not like, a negative coworker or an acquaintance where you can just be like, see ya later.
Right, exactly.
These are people we're often, tied to, whether it's by history or by love, you know, even a sense of obligation.
Totally. And the Headspace article, thankfully, doesn't just dwell on the problem.
Right.
It dives right into solutions.
Okay, good.
And it offers 7 techniques for dealing with toxic family members. And I love that it's structured that way because it promises, actionable advice, not just these vague platitudes. It's here's what you can actually do about it.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
But I love that.
And one of the first technique that they highlight is called deciding your role, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it really shifts the focus away from labeling someone as toxic and onto what do you want from this relationship?
It's a good point because, it's not always about, well, they're the toxic one. It's what do you want? How do you fit into this?
It's about taking back your power a little bit.
Yes, 100%.
Instead of getting sucked into their drama,
right?
You get to decide, okay, how do I want to show up in this relationship?
Exactly. Are you going to be the therapist's friend, always there to lend an ear? Or are you going to set some boundaries and protect yourself? It's up to you.
Yes. And that ties in perfectly with another key technique, which is setting boundaries. Because once you're clear about what your role is,
right?
What you are and are not willing to tolerate, then you can start to kind of draw those lines in the sand.
Exactly.
And the author gives a great example. She tells her family straight up.
What does she say?
She's like, I'm not discussing my brother anymore.
Wow.
And I was like, good for you.
Yeah, good for her. Setting that boundary, it's huge.
It is huge.
Because it's like you're saying, you know what? I have a right to protect myself. I have a right to protect my emotional well-being.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even if it's family,
right,
it means setting those limits.
Yeah, it's not always easy.
It's not, but it's so important. And, she goes on to talk about, like, even taking timeouts.
Okay.
Like blocking her brother's Facebook updates.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not about being cruel.
Right.
It's not about that.
No.
It's about curating your own mental space.
Totally.
It's that whole thing of, like, you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to.
That's a good one.
Right.
Ooh, I like that. It kind of reminds me of that whole, have you ever heard of that family triangle concept?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Tell me more about what you're thinking there.
Okay, so it's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Because it totally slipped my mind when I was reading this stuff. But
yeah.
It's such a good example of how those, like, unhealthy dynamics can play out in families.
It really is.
For anyone who's not familiar, can you explain what that is, the family triangle?
Yeah, so basically it's a really classic pattern in, families, relationships, where you have two family members, and I'm just going to say, like, a parent and a child, for instance, right? But it could be any two people.
Right, yeah.
And they're kind of, there's something going on in that relationship. There's some tension. There's some, maybe conflict, whatever it is.
Right.
And so they involve a third person to try to stabilize their own relationship.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So this third person gets kind of pulled into the middle, and they become, sometimes the confidant,
right,
sometimes the mediator,
right,
sometimes even like the scapegoat. And this happens all the time.
Ugh, yeah, I've been there. It's like being stuck on a seesaw that never stops,
That is such a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It's exhausting because you're constantly going up and down and you never get off the ride.
Right, exactly.
And it's so important to remember, like, you didn't sign up to be the therapist in the family.
Right.
You're not the referee. It's okay to step off that seesaw and just be like, this isn't mine to fix.
It's not your circus, not your monkeys. Right?
Exactly. There you go. You got it.
I love that. It's interesting, that whole idea of responsibility.
Yeah.
Because it kind of ties into the other article that you had shared with me about staying positive, even when you can't avoid the negativity completely.
Yeah.
Because, realistically, you can't always just cut, like, toxic family members out of your life.
Right. And some people don't want to.
Right. Exactly.
And that's okay. Like, it's a very personal decision.
It is. So then what do you do?
Right.
If you're in that situation?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, right? Like, you can't always control, like you said, who's in your life, especially when it comes to family.
Yeah.
You can't control them. You can't control their behavior. But what you can control is you. Yeah. How you respond, how you react.
Love that.
And that's where I think these strategies in this Staying Positive article are so helpful.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it gives you tools. Like, you might not be able to escape that negative environment completely.
Right.
But you can create little tools to help you.
It's like building that force field.
Yes. Exactly.
And there were so many good ones in this article. Like mindfulness was a big one.
Yeah.
And, I don't just mean like lighting incense and saying, oh.
Right. It's more than that.
Yeah. It's more about like creating that space.
Yeah. Yeah.
That pause between you and what's happening around you.
Exactly. That's such a good point, because it's like, it's that recognition that, like, okay, you might be in a negative environment.
Right.
But you don't have to let it consume you. You can kind of create that distance. And mindfulness can really help you do that.
It's like you're aware of it, but it's not like penetrating your core,
Exactly. You're observing those thoughts and those feelings without judgment.
Yeah.
Without getting, like, swept away by them,
Right. And the article also talks about the power of positive self-talk.
Oh, yeah.
That's huge. Which, that one really resonated with me, especially when it comes to dealing with toxic family members.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Because I feel like they're so good at, like,
pushing your buttons.
Yes. Pushing those buttons and bringing out that inner critic that, we all have.
Oh, 100%.
But they know exactly which buttons to push,
Yeah. It's like they can sniff them out, right?
Yes.
Like,
so here are all these
and then
thoughts.
Let's poke them a little bit.
Exactly. Like, why? So, I think in those situations, it's even more important.
Have it. Yeah.
To really consciously combat those negative thought patterns.
Absolutely.
With, affirmations, positive self-talk, whatever works for you.
And reminding yourself, like, what are my strengths?
Yeah.
What am I good at? What have I overcome in the past? Remind yourself of your resilience.
Yes. And speaking of resilience,
okay,
the last point I wanted to touch on from the staying positive piece was this idea of surrounding yourself with good influences.
Oh, crucial. Yeah.
With people who lift you up and energize you. Because it's like,
Because if you're constantly surrounded by people who are bringing you down, it's going to deplete you.
It's exhausting.
Right. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's like you're constantly trying to, like, I don't know, swim upstream or something,
Right. And you just get tired.
You get tired. And then you're like, I don't even want to be in the water anymore.
Exactly.
So it's like surrounding yourself with positive people, whether it's friends or mentors or a support group, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah.
It's like giving yourself that refill.
Yeah. It's like building your team of cheerleaders to counteract
yes, I love it.
the negativity coming from these other family members. It's about recognizing that you deserve support. And you're allowed to seek that out from other people.
Yes, 100%. And it's not a betrayal of your family.
Right, exactly.
To seek support outside of your family.
Yeah.
In fact, it will probably help you show up as a better version of yourself in all areas of your life.
It's like you're building your own personal board of advisors.
Right, exactly.
To help you navigate all this stuff. Okay, so we've talked about a lot.
We have.
Setting boundaries, mindfulness, positive self-talk, finding your support system.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. But let's get super practical for a minute,
Okay.
If someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
What are 2 or 3 really concrete things they can take away from all this?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that because you're right. Sometimes you just need those actionable steps.
Yes.
And one phrase that really stuck with me from the Headspace article was it's a Polish proverb, apparently, but it's not my circus, not my monkeys.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
You heard that one?
I love that saying.
It's so good, right?
It's so catchy.
It is. And it's memorable, which I think is helpful.
Yeah.
Because you can just, when you feel yourself getting pulled in, nope, not my circus, not my monkeys.
Right, exactly.
It's a good reminder that you don't have to own their problems.
Right.
You don't have to fix everything.
It's not your responsibility.
Exactly.
And it's not selfish to say that.
No, not at all. In fact, it's the opposite.
Right.
Self-preservation.
It's setting those boundaries.
Exactly.
Which we were just talking about. And, it ties in so well with another really practical tip from the staying positive piece.
Okay.
Which was that whole thing about using I statements.
Oh, yes. Powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful.
Because it's instead of blaming or criticizing,
Right, which never goes well.
Ever. You just put the other person immediately on the defensive.
Yeah, just starts a fight.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But with the I statement, you're just focusing on your own experience.
Exactly.
So, for example, instead of saying, you're always so negative.
Right.
Which is, again, just going to, make things worse.
Yeah, totally backfire.
You could say something like, I feel a little overwhelmed when our conversations focus on complaints. Can we talk about something else?
It's such a good example.
Yeah.
Because it's not blaming them for being who they are. It's just saying, this is how it makes me feel.
Exactly. I'm just sharing my experience.
Yeah.
It's not an attack.
It's just an invitation to maybe do something a little differently.
Right, exactly.
Oh.
And the other tip I really loved, it's a simple one, but it's easy to forget, so I think it's worth repeating.
Okay, yeah.
Was this idea of just limiting your exposure.
Oh, yeah, stepping away.
Yeah.
Take a break.
It's that simple. You don't have to answer every phone call. You don't have to respond to every text message right away.
Right.
You can take your time.
100%.
You can choose when and how you engage.
You get to decide what you're up for. I love that.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because thinking about these articles, and all these strategies.
Yeah.
One thought that came up for me, and it wasn't something they said directly, but it's something I think is important to keep in mind, which is that, toxic behavior, a lot of times, it comes from a place of pain.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Hurt people.
Right.
And so I think it's important, not to use that as an excuse, because it doesn't excuse the behavior.
Right, yeah.
But to just remember that a lot of times when people are behaving in these ways that are so hurtful, it's because they're hurting.
It's coming from somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, and so remembering that can sometimes, I think, help you detach a little bit. It's okay, I'm not condoning this, but I can at least have some compassion for where it's coming from.
It helps you not take it so personally.
Exactly. And I think when you don't take it as personally, you can set those boundaries from a more
a healthier place.
Yes, a healthier, more grounded place. This isn't about me, this is about them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, so much good stuff.
Right. It's a lot to process.
I know. So, okay, so if we're going to wrap this up,
Yeah.
What would you say, like, what's your final thought for folks?
I think it's that idea of progress, not perfection.
Love it.
It's not about being perfect at this. It's not about, like, suddenly having perfect relationships with every family member.
Yeah, because that's not realistic.
Right. It's about, like, okay, what's one tiny little step I can take this week to make things a little bit healthier?
I love that.
Maybe it is excusing yourself from that conversation when it gets heated. Or maybe it's like setting a timer for that phone call,
It can be so small.
It can be so small. It really can.
Yeah.
But I think it's like taking those small steps and then celebrating yourself for taking them. Like acknowledging, hey, I did something good for myself. I set a boundary. I took a time out. Celebrate that. And just remember that you deserve to have relationships that feel good.
Yes, you do.
You deserve to have relationships that lift you up, not drag you down.
So well said. And there you have it, folks. Another deep dive in the books.
Yes.
Practical tips.
Yes, actionable steps.
To build your force field.
I love that visual.
And deal with those tricky relationships. Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.